Council of F330, Folklore and the Environment. Here I am. You can see that the weather's changed a little bit favorably. I'm relaxing in comfortable clothing. So this is session number 5, YouTube session number 5 for F330, Folklore and the Environment. And let's do some administrative things, and then we'll get into a little bit of the content for this week. On the administrative side, I got responses to YouTube session number 4, and I can report that of those people who responded, half of you are in Bloomington, and half of you are not. One person is in San Antonio, Texas. Several are in other parts of Indiana, but that's interesting, and I wonder if that carries through that roughly half of the student population, at least the undergraduate population, is in Bloomington and half of it is not. Anyway, it's a hypothesis. That's what we have from our small sample. But thank you for replying to that. However, I was sad in a way that none of you gave me your thoughtful comments on the video or on the reading, so we'll get back to that when you respond to this video, and you'll do that, as you know, to get credit for attending F330. Let's get back to send me a short thought that you have in response to something that you hear on this video or into response to one of the readings that we're doing now. So let's get back to that routine, because I enjoy that. I like that exchange with you, that intellectual conversation that we can have. Okay, thought piece number 9. I have graded those, and you should have back my some brief comments that I made on those. And this was on performing the sacred, and it had to do with pulling together some observations from the 2 readings for last week in relationship to one of our 5 key concepts for performing the sacred. And these were pretty good, actually. As usual, I can pretty easily distinguish between those of you who have actually sat down with the reading and those of you who haven't. So, you know, it's important to sit down with the reading and put your smartphone aside and don't even think about it, and you know, spend a few minutes, a little bit of time, really engaging and interacting with the readings. Your 3rd essays will be in my Canvas file around the time that I send out this YouTube session. So I'm very much looking forward to getting into those essays. They will certainly highlight the folklorist's way of thinking, the folkloristic approach. So that's something that, as you know very well by now, I wanted to kind of nudge you in that direction with this 3rd short critical essay. In addition to that, when I read these, this will give me a chance to get a sense of where you are with your final original research project. And so this will be a very useful platform for me to get a sense of where you are, to measure your progress and communicate with you about you know, where things need to go in order for this to be a good experience for you and for me. Okay, so that pretty much brings us up to date on these administrative kinds of things. Let me just say one more thing along those lines, and that is be on the lookout for a treasure hunt. A treasure hunt is coming your way very soon, and this treasure hunt will have to do with some of the resources I've been sending you. I'm hoping that you're spending a little bit of time going into these YouTube clips, some of the musical performances and other kinds of features that are in some of the resources that I've been sending your way. So I'm cooking up a treasure hunt that will hopefully be fun and give you a chance to spend a little time delving into these resources. Okay, I think that brings us up to date on necessary administrative business. So let me turn to the content for this week. Of course, you know we're in week 11. Our topic has to do with performing worldview and heritage. I want to say a few words about the 5 key concepts for performing worldview and heritage, and in this way, I want to talk to you a little bit about how these two readings for this week connect to some of those concepts. So just briefly, this is just a few things that occur to me, and I'm sure you can have additional thoughts that would be valuable along these lines. But if we take up the first one, we focus on the way people see the world and the ways they strategically claim social identities. And so for the Mongolians that Jennifer Post writes about, and for the Haitians and Haitian Americans that Rebecca Dirksen and Lois Wilkin write about, we see a profound connection to the natural world that is part of their traditional worldview, right, in both cases. But when we see the creation of heritage, we see that they are reprocessing that connection to nature and trying to reprocess and adapt these traditional outlooks so that they make sense and they work in modern life. So that's a theme that I think we can follow with the Mongolians who go to the city. We can also follow it very readily with the Haitians that come to New York City, and we see the performing troupe in Brooklyn. The second one, worldview is grounded in local ecologies, but heritage responds to global pressures. Well, you can see this in the close attention to sparse resources in the songs of the Mongolian herders, okay? And also we see and I like this term that we find in the Haitian piece, and that is this idea of a spiritual ecology. That's another one of those terms that we might want to hang on to and think about some more. A spiritual ecology, which is at the heart of Vodou practices in Haiti. And then we see how when these traditional practices are transformed into heritage, they intersect with international styles, international taste, international audiences, and they acquire a kind of a global flavor. So that's an interesting feature to see how worldview gets transformed into heritage, and then we see the local that becomes responsive to the global. Interesting theme to follow there. Third, heritage draws a connection between past and present and often points to the future. Certainly we see in both of our case studies for this week that the Mongolians and also the Haitians delve into the past and selectively bring forward components of the past that make sense to them as they craft a meaningful identity in the present. And that identity, of course, envisions a more positive future. So we do see this interplay of these time frames in this heritage process that we're looking at. Then the fourth one, worldview and heritage are performed on multiple stages, and I think we get lots of evidence of that. Of course, in the case of the Haitian material, we see the performance stage, a dance troupe in Brooklyn, New York, and it's quite a big deal. If you look them up on Facebook and so forth, you can see that they have a lot of following. They're a significant artistic troupe in the New York City area. Of course, everything's shut down now, but that's another story. But we certainly see that also in the case of the Mongolian songs and music, which we can appreciate it in the countryside, on the steeps and the grasslands, when the herders are out with their animals, getting together to sing their songs. But then we see it on a concert stage with a choir and an orchestra, and we also see it in various kinds of pop culture transformations. So we see a range of stages. It's quite interesting to see how heritage can be performed on such a variety of stages. And finally, expressive culture is the most powerful medium to communicate worldview and heritage. And here I would just pose a question you could ask. Without expressive culture, how would people show themselves to themselves, and how would they present themselves to people outside of their communities? And the answer to that question is not obvious. So that I think helps us appreciate the centrality, the importance of expressive culture in these statements of worldview and projections of heritage. Okay, well, I'm moving towards closure here, so let's talk a little bit about next week. Next week will be week 12, April 13 to 15. Yes, we're moving into the middle of April now. And we will wrap up our DIRT segment, right? We've been doing these weeks now, looking at chapters from the DIRT book that's in progress. And we'll move into a theme called Performing Interventions. And this will be quite an interesting thing where we see how people are using folklore to intervene in ecological settings. So that'll be the subject matter for next week. And we'll wrap up that segment, and we'll move then to the final segment of the course, which will be a couple of weeks of some perspectives that I want to bring to kind of round out our coverage of our materials. And let me just say in closing for today that we will be talking seriously starting next week. We will be talking seriously in earnest. It'll get very real in terms of making sure that you all, each of you, is on the right track to, produce something that you'll be happy with for your final original research project. Well, that's all I have for you today, so I'll let you go. Be sure to sign in and drop me a thought that you have about the current things that we're discussing, and I'll be back in touch with you with some materials via Canvas, and you can look forward to the next YouTube F330 video session next Monday. Okay, so long everybody.